Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. This week on the show, Tony Peterson and I are reviewing our 2024 year in the outdoors to look for trends and patterns that can lead us to planning a better 2025. All right, welcome back to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light and their Camo for Conservation initiative. If you're not familiar, a portion of every sale of First Light's Spectre camo pattern goes to the National Deer Association to help them with their mission to improve the future for deer and deer hunters. Good stuff there. And the future is what we're talking about here today in the podcast, but we're doing that by looking to the past. Today, me and Tony are going to be talking through our 2024. Mostly focusing on our hunting seasons, but also extending back past that to other outdoor activities and adventures, the prep for our hunting seasons, all sorts of stuff like that. And we're talking through the highs and the lows, and then what takeaways we can get from that. Because by looking at the best moments of our year and the worst moments of our year, the hope is that we can identify, if there's any consistencies there. Are there any particular things that keep on showing up in the good parts or keep showing up in the bad parts? And can that help us, better plan our next year? Make sure we're leaning into the good stuff. Make sure we're learning from the less good stuff. That's the hope today. And the hope is that by us kind of working through this ourselves, you guys can learn some stuff too. Maybe you're going to hear things that you can relate to. Maybe you're going to hear some thoughts that maybe would be worth you kind of chewing on a little bit. Maybe there'll be some ideas that we have for changes we want to make next year, or things we've struggled with this past year that we're going to continue working on in 2025 that might be relatable, useful, or eye-opening for you. That's the hope as we kick off this new year, as we look forward to what should be a terrific 12 more months around the sun. So I am wishing you all a very happy new year and a great start to this one. And I hope this podcast is a useful way to do that. So without any further ado, let's get to my chat with Tony as we review our 2024 and look forward to the next year. All right, joining me on the line now is Mr. Tony Peterson. Today, when this episode is dropping, Tony, will be January 2nd. So it will be a new year. It is 2025, if you can imagine. We're recording this a little bit before that, but in present time, when folks hear and see this, is 2025. How do you feel about the new year, Tony? Is it going to be a good one?
Boy, I hope so, buddy. I hope so. Sure, I hope so.
All right, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear optimism, because that's kind of what I want to do today, is think about this upcoming year by way of reflecting on last year. So I think we've done something kind of like this in the past, where we've done kind of a season in review. And I think I've talked on an episode, I can't remember if it was with both of us, it was just one of the ones where it's just me ranting to the audience. But I think I've talked about how I do a little bit of a year in review process and try to plan out the year. So I thought maybe we'd do that together and look back on 2024, not just the deer hunting season, but maybe the larger year and our outdoor experiences, and look at three things. Look at the best moments of our last year in the outdoors, the worst moments of our year in the outdoors, and then finally, what patterns or trends or takeaways there might be when we look at those things together. Because as I've started to do this, I've started to see like, oh, interesting. When I look at all the best moments in my year, they all have this thing or that thing. Or when I look at all my worst moments, they all kind of have to do with this thing or that thing. And that might help inform me making, my plans for the next year. When I think about what I want to do in 25 or how I want to approach things in 25, maybe I can learn some shit from what went well or what went wrong last time around. So that's the plan for this quick beginning of the new year, looking forward by looking backward episode. Sound good?
Absolutely, buddy.
Cool. So 2024, looking back, if you were going to put like a grade, like a school grade on your 2024 in the outdoors. So again, not just deer, not just this fall, but across the board, your outdoor year, how would you grade it? If you had to real quick, like gut check what your thought would be. What do you think?
Man, if I'm not teasing out the whitetail hunting, I would say probably like a solid B.
And okay, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good year.
Yeah.
Is that it? How would you say that relates, or how does that stack up as far as maybe the last 10 years? Is that kind of an average, or is this a below average, above average?
You
What do you
know,
think there?
it's hard for me. It's hard for me to do this and not focus on the whitetail side of things,
Yeah.
which was just not, I would give that not a B. But man, I had a lot of really good fishing with my daughters. I had a lot of, we had a good turkey season, did a lot of stuff. Just my personal deer hunting kind of sucks. So it drug my grade down. So I would say it's pretty consistent. Like we have a lot of fun in the outdoors.
Yeah. Okay. What if I made you grade just your deer season?
I would say in the first semester, B plus. The second semester, maybe like a D minus.
Yikes.
If I was going to break it out, no, I mean it was a tough year. It was a weird year deer hunting.
Yeah.
So but those happen. Sometimes you have years where it's like you can almost do no wrong, and then sometimes you have years where you're like it just will not break my way.
Yeah. Yeah, man. You're singing a tune I can relate to this year. Because if I were to do this exercise myself, I would give my broader year, pretty close to an A. It was an A except for deer season. And deer season was like a C minus or a D. I don't know. It felt rough. So yeah, both of us had a weird fall that brought down the rest of our year. I don't know what we take away from that. Maybe we shouldn't be hosting the Whitetail podcast. But
Well,
like you said, you're going to have years like that. And I've tried to remember in the years that, like you said, things are going really well. You have to appreciate those moments because they're not guaranteed every year. And you have to remember in the years where it's just not happening, like this too shall pass. Sometimes you can do everything right and still it doesn't fall your way. And that's an important thing to remember out there.
well, right. And you can also just have, I stacked up 3 bad shots in a row that really just changed the arc of my season. I bookended them with good shots, but in the middle of that, and that's too many, like that changes your whole season in addition to just the randomness of the rut this year and the southeast winds and the foggy weather and just the weird fall of it all. It just sometimes goes weird.
So many southeast winds. That was
So
weird.
many.
That was weird.
We're still getting
okay.
them.
Yeah. I could actually use them right now. Now at this part of the year, I could use a southeast wind, but it didn't help me in November. That's for sure. Do you want to start then? Do you want to start with the good or the bad? If we break down like our highs and lows or best and worst, would you rather start on one or the other?
Let's start with the lows so we can end with the highs. Should we?
Sure. I like that. You want to lead us off? What stands out for you as a low or a worst moment or worst thing of the year? Or challenge.
I talked about this a little bit already, probably on here too, but I missed a big one in North Dakota. Just totally misjudged the rain. Wasn't at range. I wasn't in the moment the way I needed to be. It was dumb, right? Didn't bother me that much. But then I made a terrible shot on another deer that bothered me because I knew what I had to do to make the shot in that moment because I thought about it 10 million times before I took the shot, and I just reverted back to just get that arrow out the door. And I caught an artery and she died quick, but it was dumb. Like it was totally preventable. And then I did the same thing down in Iowa where I knew like the window that I had to shoot through was tight, but I didn't think it would matter. And then it got me, and I got the deer, but it was an ugly shot. And just 3 in a very short period of time on public land. That could have been I could have strung together a really nice, couple deer and had good shots. And I just didn't do it. And it bothered me so much.
Yeah, it's hard to get that funk out of the system when it goes that way. Even though you got the deer, like you said, on 2 of them, it's still I know the same feeling. I felt the same way at times too, where almost the how it went matters more than the end result.
100%. I think that's something you get to when you do this stuff enough, right? Is like you're kind of, the end result is cool, but all of the other stuff's really what matters.
Mhm.
And for me, I just making bad shots, sometimes they just happen, right? Like sometimes there's just something where you're like, man, I just didn't see that little twig or something, and it just didn't didn't break my way. But when it's like preventable and you knew it and you still did it wrong, and then that stuff kind of feeds, we've talked about this before, but like when you have those little nagging thoughts in your head at that moment of truth, and your confidence is taking a hit, suddenly it becomes not very much fun till you start
Mhm.
stringing together those double lungs again.
Yeah. So, like you said, we've talked about this a lot over the years. And you went through a thing, I don't know, a decade ago or 15 years ago or whenever it was, where you had some serious target panic issues and you pushed through it and you've come out the other side. Um, and I've publicly talked about my target panic issues and how I've tried various ways to get better at that and get through it. And I'll tell you, I've had a level of what's the right word? It's more than frustration, like a level of, "Oh, I was supposed to have this fixed." Like I said I had this fixed. I had a solution. This was supposed to do it,
Right.
and then I still make mistakes, and that like when you talk about like chipping away on the inside at yourself, um, that's hard to like keep on pushing through. Like, God dang it! Like I thought I had this figured out, and now I'm dealing with it again 2 years later, and now here it is again. So you just had a situation where you kind of had a bad run here.
Right.
How have you been processing that? How have you been shaking yourself out of that?
You
Um,
know, what's weird about it is I started this year with a perfect shot, on a doe in Minnesota, smoked her, made 3 bad shots in a row, and then I shot a buck in Minnesota, perfect, right through the heart. And so I don't feel, there are times where I feel like I slip back to major buck fever and kind of rush in the shot. I really feel that if I'm out west and an elk walks in or something, like I really have to try to not lose my shit then. But for me, the thing that like this year specifically was I know exactly what I did wrong on every shot. I just didn't do my job right. And so it's not like I feel like I have a bunch to work on there. It's just like I made dumb mistakes. Like I shouldn't do that. So like the fix isn't, I'm not searching for like a, Joel Turner type of fix here. I'm like, I know what was broken in my process there,
yeah,
and that sucks even, well, maybe not more. It's a different kind of suck, I guess.
yeah. Um, so okay, so the shooting, the bad shots, that whole situation, that's a fairly negative bummer of
Right.
of a moment. Do you want to go back and forth, or do you want to go through your whole list? Do you have a sense of what you would prefer? Do you want to get it all off
I
your
don't,
chest?
I don't care. I mean, that to me, that's really for my personal hunting. Uh, that was that was it. Like that's what brought me down. The rest of it's pretty good. Like I'm
All
not
right.
not gonna complain too much.
All right. Well, then I'll lead with my big negative one this year, um, which was my head was not in the game right this year in the fall. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about this or not, but Giannis convinced me that I should. So, you know a little bit about this, Tony, but I'll kind of share that this fall I had some weird stuff going on, and it led to me just like not being in it from mid October on. And the short version of the story is started having chest pains, shortness of breath, radiating, burning, all this kind of stuff going around in the chest region, which sets all sorts of red flags flying. And this started happening right about when you and I got back from Louisiana, right after I shot my buck in Michigan. Shot a buck in southern Michigan, like I can't remember, the 14th or 13th or 15th, somewhere in that ballpark. Felt great, got this deer on the ground, and then like the next day or two started having this stuff going on. And to really shrink down which was like 6 weeks of stuff into as short of a story as I can tell here. Um, had this stuff going on, started like noticing it and kind of worrying about it. And then as soon as you like Google anything about like what is this? What is this? Why am I feeling
Right.
this way? Then it makes you more worried about what it is and you're focusing on it more. And then you start noticing it more. And so had like a regular physical, and they, gave me some stuff to think about. But they didn't really think there was anything that you could do right away rather than going and like having like more extensive tests and stuff. So they said, well, if this thing happens or that thing happens, then we need to go and get it checked out further at the hospital or something. So as soon as she tells me about these things I need to pay attention to, like all of a sudden then I start noticing them. Every time I'm in the tree stand, you're sitting there with nothing to do but watch for deer and sitting there quietly. And when I'm not doing something else, then all of a sudden you're noticing this stuff even more. So especially when I hunted, I noticed this stuff. And so for day after day, night after night, I'm feeling this stuff and worrying about it, and it seems to be getting worse. And you know, it just very, very uncomfortable, very disconcerting, um, and very stressful. And I'd be out there hunting and not really able to enjoy what I'm doing because the whole time out there, or big parts of it, I'm thinking about it or worried about it or trying to like, is this real? Is this in my head? What's going on? The physical, she was like, well, it could just be this or that. So end of October, ended up going to the ER in the middle of the night because I had like really serious, what seemed really serious to me, stuff going on. Can't sleep all night. It's middle of the night, and so I go to the ER, and I'm like, this stuff's not going away. I don't know what it is. But when you read about some of these things, like, hey, you got to take this stuff serious. So I do. They do all sorts of tests. They hook me up to, I got IVs and I got X-rays and I've got this test and that test and all this other stuff, and kind of freaking out, like, holy shit, what is going on with me? I'm in the hospital, and after being there all night, it's like October 31st or October 30th or something like that. It's right there, and like when it should be like the sweet spot of the hunting season. And I'd gone to Illinois a couple days before that, and it got like really bad down there, and that's why that trip flopped. I went down, and I was like, God, I feel like shit. I'm not enjoying this at all. This like long drives, it would happen too more often too. So like taking long drives, I'd be like focusing on this. And the hospital visit comes out at the end of it, and there was nothing that they could find wrong with the heart or the lungs, which are like the big worries. But they couldn't really figure it out. So they said, here's a possible thing. Here's a possible thing. Keep monitoring it. We can't find anything like super, like the horribly scary stuff isn't showing up for us right now, but we still don't know. So maybe go to your primary care physician or whatever. But otherwise, here's some heartburn meds. Maybe that'll take care of it. Good luck. And so then the rut starts, and now, not sleeping very much because of the rut, traveling all around, go to Kentucky, do this public land hunt. The stuff still continues. But now I'm not sleeping. I'm stressed about general life stuff, work stuff, hunting stuff. And then this stuff kind of keeps building and simmering underneath the surface of it all. And I'm trying to like battle it out and say, I can tough it through. Like, it's nothing. I'm fine. Or what is it? Hopefully the doctors said it wasn't something, bad, super serious bad in the moment. So it's probably nothing. Keep doing your stuff. But again, wouldn't go away, kept lingering, was exacting like a mental toll on me. And it seemed like the more you think about it, of course, the worse it would get. And
You're not a guy who's prone to overthinking, are you, Mark?
yeah, exactly. So fast forward through the first 2 weeks of the rut, I'm doing my best, hunting hard, doing all that kind of stuff. But again, just like not enjoying myself, not feeling right. I remember like coming home one night, and my wife was just like, why are you so irritable? I'm like, I just want to feel like a normal person again. I just don't feel normal. I feel like, I don't know. It just was not great. Then we get to, it was a shitty rut, as I've talked about on the podcast, kind of like you, like really weird hunting situations, nothing going my way. No deer to hunt in all the places I typically hunt and have permission. Like all the mature bucks have disappeared. Get to gun season, northern Michigan, go up there with my kids. Should be a great weekend. Very exciting to be up at the family deer camp. Should be a peak moment of the year. And for all sorts of reasons, like just was like kind of stressed out about stuff. And kids and everything. And also this thing's like popping up and it's getting worse and worse throughout the day. First day there, over the night, the next day, and God, I thought maybe it had been trending down. Why is this shit happening again? What is this feeling? Why isn't this going away? And so midday on the 16th of November, I think it was, it was getting like painful. And I remember stepping outside of the cabin and just like walking around trying to drink a bottle of water, and like I remember trying to like do like some deep breaths to like calm down, because could tell I was like getting like kind of freaked out by why this was happening again and why it was getting worse, and like just again like this like frustration and not understanding what this is, why I'm feeling this way, why I feel like shit. And then my fingers started getting numb, and then I started getting like dizzy and woozy, and then it went up my arms, and then Josh, my buddy, our mutual friend Josh Hilliard, came out of the cabin just to see what I was doing, and I was like, dude, something's going on. Like I'm all of a sudden like couldn't stand up straight, and told him like I'm going numb. Then it went like up my arms, my neck, my face, everything started going like as if you'd stuck Novocaine in me. And I'm like, I think I need to go to the doctor. Something's going on. I don't know what's going on. So he like gets me in the seat of the car, and then now in this moment, I'm like, holy shit, whatever this thing is that the doctors couldn't figure out, like it's happening. Like there's something really insane going on right now. It felt like I'm having a heart attack or a stroke or whatever it is. Something real I've never experienced in my entire life was happening. And I get to the point, I'm in the front seat of the car, and my arms get like this, like across my chest, and completely lock up. Like I can't move my fingers, I can't move my arms, I can't move anything. I'm like paralyzed. And I'm like can't do anything except for try to focus on breathing and kind of get out words to Josh. I'm like, take me to the hospital, guys. Something bad's happening. And so that ended up being like the scariest moment probably of my life. I thought like, literally I was having a heart attack or a stroke or something. Pretty much thought I was dying. Told Josh like, take care of my kids, please. Like, you know, that's what I thought was going on. And takes me to the hospital, had an EMT meet us on the way there, and go through the whole 9 yards. And this is a very long-winded story of a 6-week window of my life that just happened to coincide with like the peak of our whitetail season and all the stuff we do, and made for a very unfun, challenging, stressful, confusing time period. Go to the hospital, they run all these tests and everything, and there's two main things that, you know, to I guess stop this long, boring story. Three things were identified. Number one, what was going on in that moment when I thought I was dying was not that I had a heart attack or a stroke. Thankfully, it was none of those things. They tested for clots. They tested for any kind of cardiac issues or any kind of anything like that. None of those things happened. What it was that my CO2 levels had plummeted to almost zero. They were able to check what my CO2 levels were in that moment, and it was like 2 or something. And it's I don't know what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be way, way higher than that. And so what that happens, that's caused by basically hyperventilation, which is breathing too deeply, too fast, or something. I can't remember exactly what the thing is, but I was basically having a stress-related panic attack or something in that moment, which led to this thing with my breathing, which led to this feeling, which apparently is a common thing for folks having some kind of thing like I was having. And so that was what caused this thing on that Sunday or Saturday, whatever day that was. And then I go to another series of doctors. They do these different tests. What they found, or what they believed was causing the original issue, was this condition that apparently leads to like inflammation of the cartilage and muscles across my sternum, up and down my sternum. So like a musculoskeletal issue had caused or has been causing this initial pain that I'm feeling in my chest. And you Google this stuff, and it's like, yeah, people think they're having a heart attack with this thing. It's a common thought that people have and worry that people have with this condition. And so what the doctors think was going on was that I had this original thing, which has been going on and is still ongoing, which then led to me thinking about it, focusing on it, worrying about it, being stressed about it, which then, she's like, well, do you have any stress in your life otherwise? Are you not sleeping otherwise? Are you working too much otherwise? Are you going otherwise? I'm like, well, yeah, nonstop right now. So basically what the doctors think is that I had this original chest issue and pain, which was musculoskeletal. And then the hunting season related stress, travel related stress, compounded on top of me stressing and worrying and thinking about this chest pain and shortness of breath and all this stuff, had then led to this thing snowballing and snowballing and snowballing to where I would be having this concern about, why is my chest hurt? Why can't I breathe right? And that leads to actual physiological changes related to that stress, which do lead to more chest tightness, chest pain, breathing issues, which then led to more of that. And so that was going on for like 6 weeks and led to me having this incident where I thought I was dying and went to the hospital, and just led to a really effed up fall where I was not able to enjoy it. A lot of it was not able to really be um, in it the way I usually am. Didn't have the chutzpah and excitement, was worried about my health. So I was like, I don't know if I want to travel across the country to go to this other state or do this other thing, because I just want to get this shit figured out and feel normal again.
Right.
I don't know, man. It just led to a really, really weird fall that, on the bright side, I think I'm coming out of it. Now that I understood what's going on, we were able to do some stuff that has reduced that original pain, and that condition I think is improving. And then I've also been able to kind of work on chilling out a little bit, dealing with some of that stress. I think a lot of that stress has left now that I have some answers.
Right.
You know, exploring some mindfulness practices, some woo woo shit, and and maybe that's what I've needed to. So yeah, that's been the big negative for me this fall, um, which probably has led to some of the lack of quote unquote success. But also, there's just the other weirdness going on where I just haven't had anything to hunt, some of my spots, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, that's what's going on.
Yikes.
That's what I've dealt with.
So can I
That's
tell you
weird.
something that reminds me of?
Yeah.
Because I knew you were going through that, obviously. I kind of forgot about this. When I quit drinking, very shortly after, I had a lot of pain on my right side. And I went through MRIs and all kinds of shit because I was like, oh, great, I quit drinking. Now my liver's going to crap out on me. And they finally figured out that I had torn the cartilage underneath my ribs. And it sounds like kind of similar to what you were talking about with your chest, where it's like this thing happens and they're like, we don't know. And then all of a sudden they're like, no answers. And your brain starts to spiral. Yeah. It's shit you just don't see coming.
No, not at all. Really, really weird. Really, yeah. I don't know if I've still fully processed all of like the stuff that's coming out of that. Just it made me feel very old, like or more mortal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this is the first time in my life where I was like, holy shit! Like I thought I was gonna croak.
Right.
Am I doing stuff right? Am I taking care of myself right? Do I need to re-examine how I'm taking care of myself in other ways? I don't know. It was just a whole bunch of stuff that made me already, and will, I'm sure, make me think more in the future about a lot of different things about how I do stuff.
Yeah, it makes me feel bad because when you started your story, I remembered the other part of my fall that sucked, but I don't want to talk about it now because yours is way worse.
Well, I still want to hear about it. It's
But yeah,
all issues are valid on this podcast, Tony.
I'm glad you got that sorted out because I know that was weighing on you real heavy, or at least you got some clarity on it, some visibility
Yeah.
into it. It is really hard to. It's sort of hard to understand something like that if you haven't gone through it or faced it, or had those little kids at home and think about your own mortality. I mean, that's a heavy mental lift that really when stuff like that happens, it really makes like the size of the buck. Like some of the stuff seem really stupid that we kind of
So
fixate on.
trivial. Mm-hmm.
And so what I was going to say too is, so you and I started out, the Louisiana trip, and then we just went gangbusters, right? Back to back to
Yep.
back, whatever, just trying to, you have like 8 weeks of just chaos,
Yep.
right? And I got through all of that. I found a really good concentration of bucks on public land in northern Wisconsin. Like, I had something going on. Took my daughter in there. We had 130 incher at like 40 yards. I mean, like, cool. And so when I got out of that, and we got out all of our travel, I was like, I'm going over there. I scrapped my whole plan for the rut. And I'm like, I'm going to go focus on this area public, not hunt my private, and work those deer. And I got over there, and on my first morning, had a pretty good 8-pointer come in that I almost killed. He was 10 yards away, and I just started to draw, and he busted me. He just came in the one place where he was going to get a little bit of my wind. But I was like, day one for that area, really, like, that's a good encounter. Like, I go all season and don't have that. And that night I hunted, didn't see anything, and left. And I drove a route that I've driven, I don't know, dozens and dozens and dozens of times, maybe hundreds at this point, between the trout fishing and everything else, and just looking for deer. And I took a slightly different route. I went 2 miles on a highway when I usually go on the gravel. I got out on that highway in the rain, and I had a guy coming up behind me pretty quick. I just looked in my rearview mirror, looked back up, and there was a deer coming out on the highway. And I was like, there's nowhere to go. Just smoked
Oof.
her day one. So the first chance I had to hunt for myself, it was over. And I'm over
Yikes.
there in northern Wisconsin, and you're just like, man, this stuff can go south. And where I'm going with that is, like, everything was fine, right? Like, I didn't go in the ditch or anything. I mean, it really sucked. I had a knifer. It was just, not a fun experience, right? Then you're done. But it's like, it reminded me, like, when I told people, I'm like, oh, I just smoked a deer. The first question is, are you okay? And you forget this kind of, like, you forget how quickly something
Right.
can go wrong,
Yeah.
and how the other thing that your story with what you went through for, multiple weeks of, like, am I freaking dying here? Like, are my kids going to not have a dad in a very short amount of time? Like those, like, heavy things you don't ever consider until they're right in your face. It's like, when we should just treat each other better. You know what I mean? Like, when that's happening, and then if you would have gone out and killed a 2.5-year-old just to be happy, a whole bunch of strangers would have shit on it for the size of it without having a clue what you just went through. And so I think it's a good reminder when we see people out there wherever, like, you don't know what they're going through.
Yeah.
Like, you have no clue what's, like, happening in their day-to-day life. Like, I think that's a good reminder.
Yeah. That's such a great reminder. And also be kinder to ourselves too, I think. Because I found myself, like, for example, in Kentucky, um, just like beating myself up a bunch about, not getting on the deer, or not being close enough, or didn't make the right. You should have moved there. You should have moved there at midday. I'll sit there for like hours thinking about, I should have done this, or you should have done that thing, or you could have done this thing but you didn't, or God, we should have approached it this way, or things go wrong, and then you're pissed off about it, or frustrated about it, or thinking about, well, here's another thing that didn't go my way, or what's such and such gonna mean for the future, or whatever. And you know, anytime anytime where I'm overly focused on the end goal, it always leads to bad stuff. It always leads
Right.
to stress and not enjoying it. And especially given the stuff I was going through this year, I probably should have cut myself a little bit of slack, maybe. But instead, I was like maybe doubly hard on myself in some ways, because I was like, Jesus, like, just do something right.
Right.
Um, and man, I don't know. I mean, back to your point about, shoot a 2.5-year-old, or shoot whatever you want, or this whole year without having like a mature buck to hunt, I've been wrestling with, you know, why am I obsessing over trying to find a mature buck? Maybe I just need to just shoot anything to have fun, or maybe I just need to chill the heck out and stop stressing about it, and just start taking my kids hunting and enjoy
Right.
that, because that's the one thing that's super fun. But instead, I've because I haven't killed a mature buck yet. I've pushed off taking my kids more and more and more because I'm still trying to kill a mature buck. And so now I'm into December and haven't hunted with my kids at all because I've been feeling like I'm obligated to kill a big buck, um and then, not doing the thing that really would bring me the most joy, or that is the most fun, or that actually, matters in the long term. Uh, so those are the kinds of things and questions that I've been wrestling with again this year, as I, continue to evolve, I guess, as a hunter, and trying to understand, what I want this to look like for me and what my goals are and will be in the future. This is definitely another step this year of re-examining that stuff.
Right. It's a good reminder. I mean, and you said something before. I wrote about this for a Foundations episode that I think probably came out this week, that this episode will drop, about goals and how often in hunting we kind of screw them up. Like the goal, it's like so easy to be like, well, I want a buck bigger than one I've ever killed, or I want a 140, or, you talked about like the end result sort of tainting the whole process and focusing too much on that. And, I felt that with my Iowa tag this year, where it was like, I was really looking forward to that. And I had about 17 things go wrong in the, in a very short period of time, and was like, now I kind of just want to kill one and get out. And I just looked at it wrong, and when you get one of those premier tags like that you've been waiting on, or any, whenever there's like a heightened level of pressure,
Yeah.
to do well, then all of a sudden it can be real not fun in a hurry. And it's a hard thing to remember, but it happens. And when it happens, it sucks bad.
Yeah. I don't know what the solution is to that. I thought a lot about that. It's like, man, every time I put these like increased expectations on a hunt or a place or a season or whatever, it always comes down to that like self-induced pressure that you put on yourself or the situation. And that always, I remember when it used to be just like really fun to get up in the morning, go hunt and see what the hell you're going to see.
Right.
Man, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna go out there and who knows what's gonna happen. And if it didn't go your way, no big deal. I'll just go hunting again next time when I want to go. Now it's like, I mean, what's a little bit sad for me is that I caught myself and recognized this in myself, years ago, a couple of years ago, we were talking about this, and still, it's really hard to break those bad habits. Like I still find myself, executing what feels like a military mission,
Right.
and beating myself up about it. And, you know, I've yet to figure out how to shake that. Maybe that's just part of it. If you're going to try to do anything well, which we are trying to do things well, you inherently have to have that along the way. But maybe there's a middle ground that is where I'm constantly trying to find things and, find that sweet spot. But yeah, you kind of, I don't know. I don't know exactly where that right spot is, but I do know that and the obsession by the media and us in the past and all the Instagram stuff and YouTube and everywhere, like constant big buck this, big buck that, big buck this, like that is definitely, you and I can't be the only ones feeling this way. Like there's got to be a lot of other people who are feeling this. And I want to find some way to, to, to change that a little bit in whatever small way we can. I don't know what that looks like yet, but man, like we got to keep the joy in deer hunting and get off of this obsession with like, did you get your big one this year? Because I don't think that's helping many people.
Right. I mean, well, I can tell you, I was looking at what I kind of want to do this year for hunts, and I definitely want to hunt a new state somewhere. I'm going to go public land hunt. It might be Kansas, might be somewhere else. I'm not sure yet. But I really realized that when I went over to Wisconsin with my daughter, where I was like, we just got to get a little buck to come in here and she's going to be super happy. And we hunted private land where I had a bunch of cameras out, didn't have much for deer going on. And then I said, you know what? She's good enough. I probably wouldn't have done this with her sister, but she's good enough where I was like, let's go scout public land and just see. I have a spot that I really like and there might be something there. And the minute we pulled up there, I could see rubs in the woods and a scrape on this little logging road coming out. And I said, we're going to go in here and we're going to do something fun. And the minute we started hunting there, instead of being like, well, I don't have any pictures on this camera this in the last 48 hours and the wind's wrong for this spot and this. As soon as we walked in there, I was like, now I'm having fun. Like now there's a mystery. I don't care who's living here. I can tell there's good ones here, but there's just a concentration of deer. Now we're going to figure it out. And we blanked that night. And then we went back in the next morning with a new plan. And we kind of, like I walked her through OnX and like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get up early. We're going to go in there and maybe, just maybe. And it almost worked. And it was like, okay, this is what I like. I need those reminders because it's easy in a lot of situations to be like, well, I'm not excited about this, like you said, because I don't have any deer to shoot. It's like, okay, well, on that private place where your standards are this high, whatever, that's fine. You don't have anything there. Is it better to not hunt? Like, can you go find that somewhere else, or can you go do something else? Or like, what can you do to make sure that you keep that going instead of just being like, I hunt this 40 acres and there's no shooters, so I'm not going. Because I think we are on a dangerous path with that. And you hear that a lot where people are like, I'm not going in until that buck shows up. And when he does, then I will hunt him.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so different than some of the ways you can do it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, one of the most fun hunts I had in this area where I have been, struggling to find a buck to hunt was when I was like, you know what? Nothing's working. I'm not finding them anywhere. Let's just do something crazy. Let's go in and hunt this other area that I never go to that shouldn't have deer, but I'm going to still hunt my way in there and sneak in and hunt on the ground and slip around and sneak into some bedding areas and just do some crazy stuff just to switch it up because can't hurt at this point. Just being willing to adventure a little bit, try different things. Or another thing I haven't done, but I keep on threatening to do and I want to do is like just go up north and track deer in the snow. Try that again. Just drive around, find a track, go for a hike, see if you can walk down a deer. And I'd be thrilled to shoot any buck like that. But we put these like self-created restrictions on ourselves or feel like we're obligated to stick with an original goal or whatever. And allow that to kind of paint ourselves into a corner, which is a mistake probably.
Dude, we just can't help but trophy hunt.
Mm-hmm.
We can't help it. It's just like so ensconced in our like DNA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I mean, kind of fast forwarding a little bit into like the good stuff, like the things that were the highs and the best moments were the moments when I wasn't worried about that. Like the times when I was able to pull myself away from that were the best moments of my year. Like, going, doing the couple hunts that I have been able to do with my son so far. Super fun. Best moments of my hunting season. Hunting with my son for turkeys this spring. We got a turkey together. That was a highlight. Absolutely incredible. Another thing that stands out, and this is, I guess I'm kind of skipping to some of the takeaways or trends and patterns I saw, but really almost all of the best moments of my year in the outdoors were those, were those in which I was with people. Right. It was like the times that I made time to do something with someone in my life that I care about. Those are the absolute best. They were not the times when I had the best chance to kill a big, huge buck. It was the time when I was with my dad at deer camp or with Josh and his kids and my kids at deer camp. It was our spring turkey camp where a bunch of my hunting buddies all get together for a long weekend and chase turkeys and do a bunch of dumb stuff and have a good time. That's a highlight. And again, it gets harder and harder, I think, for a lot of us who are trying to kill a bunch of mature bucks. You end up spending a bunch of long days on the road and you hunt by yourself here. In our case, maybe a camera guy's with us, but we do a bunch of like those kinds of trips where, we're on a mission, you're with your camera guy, I know guys who do this, like we've got plenty of friends who do this kind of thing who are like lone wolf superstar deer hunters who feel like they've got to kill $4 a year or $5 a year. They just travel from place to place. And when you do that, you oftentimes sacrifice time with buddies for more time in the woods or more time to go to more states or whatever it is. And I keep on seeing over the last couple of years, paying attention to this, that those are almost always the times when I'm overstressed and not having fun. And the times when I am like, hey, I'm going to enjoy my time with my friends. Yeah, I'm going to hunt hard and do some good stuff. But at the same time, I'm going to have lunch with my friends. Or, hey, I'm going to take my kids out for some of these hunts. Like those end up being the best. So I got to get better at leaning into those.
It's tough, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm right there with you, man. I mean, if I look back at this year and just think about like what were the real highlights. The first one was turkey season when my daughters doubled up on this hunt that was just we had gotten our butts kicked for a couple of days and then the weather broke and I called in some birds from so far away that shouldn't even have been in play and they both shot jakes at the same time and were just stoked. It was cool. My buddy and his daughter got to watch it because they were in a blind not too far away. And then that bear with my daughter was for sure the highlight because I had my daughters over there a whole bunch baiting the bears and setting up cameras and blinds and, trout fishing in the middle of the day or whatever. And just the whole experience, like culminating with her, like making a perfect shot on a bear was like, it was just cool. And then her sister, the one who's, we just dropped an episode a little bit ago where I was hunting with one of my daughters when she drew a bear tag, 2 years ago now, where we went over and kind of did a combo hunt. She killed a spike. This year we went out the first weekend we could get over there, which was I think in the end of September, and just sitting with her on the ground. So we weren't in a blind for the first time. Like I'm trying to get them hunting a little more than just sitting in a blind.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sitting on the ground and it was getting late and I looked over there and this deer walked out and we had been talking obviously and she had killed 2 spikes and she's like, I hope it's a spike. And she's like, I really want to kill a velvet deer. And it was like September 20th or something. I'm like, well, you're not going to kill a velvet deer. Sorry, just this is not going to happen. And then I glassed this deer at like 40 yards and I'm like, honey, I think it's a spike and I think he's in velvet. And I could hear her breath just like, and he walked out and she shot him and I'm glassing and I'm like, I think that's a velvet spike. And it was.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what, man, she was real happy with herself. So she's gone 3 for 3 on spikes in the last 3 years. And she's kind of hanging her hat on that. But those 3, and then, we did some late season hunting. I'm trying to get them to like suffer a little bit and earn it. Mm-hmm. And dude, it's so fun to sort of vicariously experience this through them now, like with their first tree stand hunt, or both of them killed deer from the ground, not in blinds this year. And both of them had encounters with deer that we almost killed, but didn't. And so even with like the limited time of fall and all the school schedules and our travel schedule and everything, I was like, man, the thing that really kept me upright this year was just stuff with them. And I mean, and we caught a ton of fish. We had a great year fishing too. So
yeah,
get out with your kids.
Yeah. And that was, you alluded to the other thing I was going to say, other than the fishing other than the kids thing, was just the other highlights of my year were when I inserted diversity and adventure into our outdoor experience. Even though you and I are whitetail obsessed and that's like our thing, every time we went fishing as a family, every fishing trip this year, we did a lot of it. That was so much fun. And that's, as we've talked about in the past, it's like a pressure release. It's just kind of straight type 1 fun. There's not all the pressure and expectations. I've thought a lot about like, how can I act the way I act when I fish, but while I'm hunting? Is there any way that we can hunt and feel the way we do when we fish, or is it just inherently different?
I don't know how.
How?
You got to get yourself a lab. You got to train it for pheasant hunting, and then you got to follow it around in a slough. Because I feel the same way when I'm pheasant hunting as I do when I'm trying to get a smallie to come up on top water. I'm like, this is just pure in the moment. It's kind of like Western hunting, where it's like you're just like, what's happening now? Mm-hmm. Like, what's the input now? Like, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen in the next 5 minutes? It's just so in the moment and fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, there's got to be ways to bring that, to cross-pollinate that somehow. But yeah, like the absolute highlights of the year, some epic fishing experiences with the boys, really getting to see my kids like really figure it out, especially my oldest. Like he's really into fishing and getting good at it. Like proficient, and like we can be out there and he's just going at it. Like we were on one camping trip this summer and 3 days straight, 7+ hours a day, all day. And that's all he wanted to do. Like it was like him saying, no, I want to keep going. I want to keep going. There was no like, oh, I want to go home, Dad. It was like, no, I'm just going to cast and cast and cast. And like, he's just having a blast. That was absolute highlight. And then, my Alaska trip, doing the fishing trip in the Keys, like just like seeing new places, going new places outside my comfort zone, that kind of stuff. And again, that's something I think can translate to the whitetail world too, is like breaking out of your usual box, adding adventure, adding new things to it. I think is a great way. Like, I feel a need for a new like whitetail adventure in my future. I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but whether it's going, or maybe it's doing the tracking in the snow thing like I talked about, or I've threatened to do a backpacking whitetail hunt for years, but something, because those things always end up being a lot of fun when there's not a lot of expectation on the actual kill. Again, it's like, hey, let's go out there, have an adventure, do all this fun stuff, and chase some deer for fun, and hopefully it works out. But it's not going to be a tragedy if you don't kill 150.
Right.
I think that's a big takeaway, is like adventure, diversity and experience, and do it with people you care about. Those things, like, that's the recipe.
Right. Well, I mean, you touched on a good point there that we talk about some, but when you kind of keep arcing back to this thing of like, when it doesn't have to be the 150, when it doesn't have to be the trophy, when it doesn't have to be the mature buck, most people they're not going to go for a little one, or they're not going to still hunt or something when it's like your home ground that you've been working on and you have your hit list and right on down the line.
Yeah.
So again, it's like you might have to go find that somewhere else where you don't care. Like some of the most fun that you can have with whitetail hunting is going somewhere where you absolutely do not expect to shoot a big one. And you're like, now my standards have recalibrated to this 4-day hunt somewhere else. And it doesn't have to be an out-of-state trip. Like I think about this in my home state of Minnesota a lot. I mean, I can hunt way vastly diverse types of habitat and terrain and never leave the boundaries of my state. And it's not like unique to Minnesota, right? Like people think about, you and I love to go to North Dakota, right? You think about how different the western half of that state is versus the eastern, southern versus northern.
Sure.
There are some opportunities out there that where you don't have to buy that non-resident tag and spend a bunch of money and then have that pressure of the non-resident trip, because immediately that changes the kind of the vibe of the whole thing. Sometimes it's like a matter of going an hour away to do that big woods hunt where you're just like trying to track one or something. And it's just a different feel than going out on your lease or your home farm and being like, well, I haven't got a picture of my number one buck in 5 days, and maybe the neighbor shot him or he's nocturnal or whatever. It's like you've just like reshuffled the deck completely. Even if it's just for like a day, it can be so fun.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point. And I just see it in like so many of my other buddies too. Like, just the worry, the stress, the pressure we put on, oh, is there going to be a big one, or is, the hit list, all this stuff like you're talking about. We've put all this stuff up on a pedestal. We've built up all of this stuff and made it seem like it's all so important. And it's I don't know. In some ways we're ruining a really good thing. And it's like a collective. It's like it's the social media / larger media / just the way of the world / I don't know what, but it has definitely, it's definitely something that I think we as a community have got to keep on thinking about. And I know we've been talking about it for years, but it's not fixing itself. And yeah, I guess I'm just living it. You're living it. We're all living it. But even some of my best hunting buddies that have dealt with this themselves, when they end up going, instead of, like, I've got a friend who hunts in a great area. He's got some really good property. And for whatever reason this year, just there weren't the bucks he was after. Like, there's some good bucks, but he wants a big 5-year-old or whatever, and they weren't there. And, he's a guy who historically would get really stressed about this. And at times would get really stressed about this. And like the hunting buddies in our group are kind of giving him a hard time about it. He doesn't have shit to hunt. But same thing as that you're talking about, like, we've created these crazy standards for ourselves because what you're supposed to do or whatever. There's plenty of deer he could go and hunt and have a good time with, probably, but he's convinced himself that he should only be shooting 5.5-year-old bucks or 160s or whatever it is. And so because of that, he feels like he has a shitty hunting season. But then when he decides to go trapping, like run the trap line instead, or take his son squirrel hunting, like he has a blast.
Right.
Or when he goes out there and, has buddies come and hunt around them and sees them shoot something different, like that's a super fun time too.
Right.
So I think like there's obvious cures here. We're just allowing expectation or something to get in the way.
Well, right. And I mean, one thing that I'm kind of hyper aware of right now is the more that you go out and do this random stuff that maybe doesn't have as much weight as drawing that Iowa tag and trying to kill a 150, it's sort of the antidote to being super judgy, right? Because you see this so often with people who have like, somebody is hunting in Candyland somewhere and they're like, why would anybody shoot anything less than a 140 or whatever? And you're like,
right.
You have no concept of what other people are going through to hunt or their time or like what's important to them. And I never do this. I made a mistake and I looked at the comments when they posted a teaser from that hunt with my daughter. They were generally very good, but like literally the first comment was not trying to throw shade here, but why would you shoot that little buck when you could wait for a bigger one? And you know me, I'm a nutcase. So my first reaction is like, I'm like, God, I wish you were standing in front of me. I'd kick you in the taint so hard. Like, but I'm like, yeah, she's an 11-year-old girl hunting in northern Wisconsin, and she has a couple of days a season to hunt. Like, it's not your tag. You know what I mean? Like, the petty part of me wants to look that guy up and be like, how come your wife's not a 10? Why is she a 5? Right? Like, there are 10s out there, right? Why are you rolling around with this average woman when you could have a supermodel if you just tried harder? Like, that would make me a huge prick, right?
Yeah.
Not my journey, right? That's his journey. And I just think like the more you go out and you're like, you know what? I'm getting out of my farm that I know really well, or I'm going to get out of the box blind on the food plot and I'm going to go still hunt them or whatever. Like, whatever you do, this is like to get you outside of your comfort zone a little bit. You start to like realize, okay, like there's more to this. Like I'm seeing this such a myopic thing, like a lot of people feel that way about baiting, and I can shit on baiting with the best of them. But when you go do it in different situations, whether it's in Texas or some other place where you could dump corn on the ground, you go, okay, like I get it. Like maybe it's not for you, like, but you can see why it would be for somebody else, or like what, like it just like sort of dulls those sharp edges you carry with like that chip on your shoulder. And you're just like, okay, like, we're hunting rabbits with antlers here, right? Like, should I get super pissed off and go after a stranger over this? I don't know, man. Like, is it that important?
Yeah. I think that's that's a really good place to end this out is both being a little bit more, I don't know if it's forgiving or kind. I mean, you said like being kinder to others, not being so damn judgy, not, all that kind of stuff. And then also being a little bit kinder to ourselves and releasing some of the pressure off ourselves, getting back to having fun, focusing on what's important here. I think if we can do those two broad sets of things going into 2025, should be a dang good year.
Maybe. I hope so, buddy. For your sake and mine and everybody who's listening, I hope so, buddy.
And on that note, Tony, appreciate you joining me. Let's do our best to make 25 a good one. And there'll be lots of fun adventures ahead for us to share. And looking forward to hearing from plenty of listeners about their journeys too. So without any more, I don't know, crazy stories from Tony about kicking people in the nethers, let's wrap this one up. And thank you for joining us, folks. And until next week, stay wired to hunt. All right, and that's it for us today. Appreciate you being here. Thank you for kicking off the new year with Tony and I. It's going to be a good one. I don't care what Tony says. We're going to have a terrific 2025, and I'm sure you will. And I'm excited to be sharing it with you. Thanks for being a part of this community, and thanks for staying wired to hunt.